Wow, welcome to the Clarity Challenge. My name is Mason I.B. West, and I am your facilitator at the Clarity Challenge. The Clarity Challenge is about asking and answering questions that are so very important in enabling us make intentional, positive, and productive decisions, especially as it concerns our relationships. Today, we had a series of questions. When put together, they are all pointing in a particular direction. We asked 9 questions. Questions like, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are your partner's strengths? What are your partner's weaknesses? How does your strength complement his or her weaknesses? And then we asked a whole lot of other questions like, how can I help you reach a dream you have? How can I better meet your emotional needs and desires? What's the greatest accomplishment of your life? Tell me about a time you made a mistake. And briefly explain what the mistake was, but don't dwell on it. And then quickly switch over to what you learned or how you improved after making that mistake. You might also explain the steps you took to make sure that the mistake never happened again. I want to focus my narrative this day on the first 5 questions that has to deal with strengths, weaknesses, and how our strengths complement our partner's weaknesses. This is, for me, so important. These are questions we must ask intentionally before we come. Listen, one of the things we do in the LoveLife Institute is that we prefer, we do what we call the Love Tech Clarity Profiling. In the Love Tech Clarity Profiling, what you would have called a pre-engagement profiling, we would have preferred that before people graduate their relationships into an engagement, they should go through the Love Tech Clarity Profiling or participate, first of all, for starters, in the Clarity Challenge, and then graduate it into the Love Tech Clarity Profiling, where we are able to look at some of these things practically. It is when you have been able to identify your partner's strength and identify their weaknesses and see how these things complement, then you can now make up your mind for an engagement. Not after engagement, then you are now beginning to do your checks and balances. It doesn't make sense. It's like putting the cart before the horse. It doesn't make sense. First things should take place first. And so the purpose of these questions is to define in its clearest terms that we understand our strengths. We understand their strengths. We understand our weakness and limitations. We understand their weaknesses and their limitations. And we are able to see arrive at a place of compromise where these strengths and weaknesses so complement that it swallows up. My strength swallows up my partner's weakness. Listen to this. If you claim to be strong, but your strength exposes your partner's weakness, that's not a strength. That's a weakness. Your strength is not supposed to expose your partner's weakness. Your strength is supposed to cover up their weaknesses in such a way that whenever it happens, when events, situations arise that is supposed to expose them because of your presence in their lives, their inability, their limitation is not supposed to come to the fore. It's supposed to be hidden, swallowed, unnoticed, undiscovered by the world. But if your strength only is relevant, it only brings about, helps people to see their inadequacies, that's not a strength. It's a worse weakness than what it is that they're dealing with. And so we must come to the place where we understand the workings of these things. So the question for me is that, is there something about your partner that you've been complaining about forever without a change? Is it possible that you approach it differently so that you can have a better result? Because listen, I think the challenge is that we do not understand what weaknesses are. And so the purpose of my discourse today is to talk about partner weakness management. It's a broad subject I can't do in a single video. And that's the next challenge I have. This might take me part 1, part 2, part 7. I don't know how long it will take me, but first of all, we have to deal with it. Now, based on these questions, our model couples in class submitted a couple of weaknesses that they have identified with respect to their partner. One of the weaknesses that was submitted, one lady or somebody said that their partner gets angry too quick, even when you don't expect her to. Another person says the partner is always silent and snubbing when angry. Someone else says the partner has some level of disrespect to them. Somebody says the partner has difficulty in forgiving people. Now, when I go down into my discussion, we will find out whether these things, which of them is a weakness, whether these things are weaknesses, or if there is another name we should give to them. Because if these are weaknesses, then I'm disturbed, I'm worried. Somebody said their partner's weakness is procrastination. Somebody said their partner's weakness is that they take up too many responsibilities. Somebody said their partner's weakness is that they have a tendency for avoiding people, for avoiding someone. Probably if they're hungry, if something is happening, I don't know what it is. It's not too clear what the person meant by that, but the person talks about avoidant life. Somebody says that the challenge, the weakness of their partner is that they can be carried away easily by things. Someone says their partner's weakness is that they don't appreciate effects. They're not appreciative. There is a refusal to set goals because of the fear of the unknown. One says a partner is not too romantic. His or her partner is not too romantic. Is self-conscious. Is not able to engage in long phone conversations. These are weaknesses as outlined by participants on the platform. The question for me is, how do you deal with this? Now, when we came to the other question, how can your partner meet your emotional needs or desires? One couple partner here says, I'm still learning to be romantic. So accept my level of romance. Says, just accept me as I am. Now, that's a profound statement, and it's a profound request that this partner is putting forward to her other partner. Now, that's what she said to her partner. He should accept her the way she is. Now, when she's referring to him now, the next thing she said was, when refusing to do something, think about how it affects me too and what it can cause. Now, the imbalance I see in this is that when it comes to her own weakness, she's weak, she's not romantic. She wants to be accepted the way she is. When it comes to him not being easily motivated, not being a driver, not being actionable, when refusing to do something, think about how it affects me and what it can cause. She wants him to master his weakness and do something when she wants him to do something. But when it comes to her own weakness, she don't want to master it. She wants to be accepted the way she is. You can see the imbalance. So when it is my weakness, I want you to be understanding. When it is your weakness, I don't want to be understanding. Situations like this can make things difficult, can lead to conflict. These are flashpoints in relationship, for relationship crisis. It is the reason why discussions like this become critical. So we want to look at how to manage our partner's weaknesses. But before we go into the whole issue about managing partner weaknesses, we must first of all establish that even God recognizes the existence of weakness or weaknesses among his creation. If you look at the Bible in Romans chapter 14 from verse 1 to 4, the Bible says in verse 1 precisely, him that is weak, I'm reading the King James translation, him that is weak in the faith, receive ye, but not to doubtful disputation. Look at that. So there are people who are weak in faith. The Bible recognizes that. He said, even though you should receive them, meaning accept them, don't judge them. So don't judge them, accept them. He says, don't accept them and be arguing and be going into disputes about preferences, about what should hold, about what should not hold. He said, no, receive them, but not to doubtful disputations. If you engage doubtful disputations, then you have not received them. If you keep the argument on what should be and what should not be, then you have not received them. In verse 2, he says, for one believes that he may eat all things. Another, who is weak, eats only herbs. You can see that. So one person's weakness is that he can't eat nothing but herbs. Another person perhaps is strong. He eats everything, doesn't affect him. He says, verse 3, the person that eats everything should not despise the person that does not eat everything. And the person that does not eat everything should not judge, or the person that eats everything should not judge the person that does not eat. The person who does not eat should not judge the person who eats. He says, for God has received them. Verse 3, I think, now says, verse 4, who are you to judge another man's servant? To his own master he stands or falls. You shall be holding up, for God is able to make him stand. Yea, he shall be holding up. God is able to make him stand. And now I read that scripture to establish the fact that even God recognizes and respects the fact that weaknesses exist in our human nature. And so there has to be a way of us also towing that path. And of course, the beauty about it is that we all have weaknesses. We only have the tendency to amplify the weakness of the other person without thinking or knowing or acknowledging or realizing that we also have our weaknesses. If we all go about amplifying each one the other's weakness, then that marriage, that relationship, that business, that endeavor, that enterprise is not going to go very far. The second thing we want to do is that we must name specifically what the weakness is. It's an advantage to be able to identify what the weakness is, and that's where we have a lot of work to do. Just like I said in the 13 items I mentioned earlier, I said, I don't know if everything there is a weakness. We need to really come to terms or come to the understanding is what really is a weakness. What should we really classify as a weakness? For some people, anger is a weakness, anger and anger management. For some people, there is a weakness, there is insecurity, there is infidelity, there is financial instability or joblessness, there is impatience. Some people don't know how to dress. Some people are alcoholics. Some are phone freaks. Some are beer. Some can't do without. Some people just keep late. They keep late. They're not good with time. So the first thing is to identify what is the weakness that my partner is dealing with. So we need to identify the kind of problem we're faced with. That brings us to the discussion of, number one, is that thing really a weakness, or is it a mistake, or is it wrongdoing? So I've looked at all of these I've categorized them into three. It's either it's a mistake, but you think it's a weakness, or it's a wrongdoing, but you're categorizing it as a weakness, or that it is a weakness. They cannot be the same thing. Now, if it's a mistake, the way you approach it must be different. If it's a wrongdoing, a crime, as it were, the way you approach it must be different. And sweetheart, if it is a mistake, the way you approach it has to be different. And so this brings us to what we are going to do with identifying what we're dealing with. So we're talking about partner weakness management. But before we can talk about managing the weakness, we have to identify the weakness. We must identify the weakness. So now we're going to look at partner weakness identification. And that may take me into the next video. Now, once we're able to identify what truly a weakness is, I'm going to come in the next video and discuss about partner weakness identification. Once we can recognize what a weakness is, the next thing to do is to accept the fact of who our partner is instead of fighting it. Listen, you can't change a weakness by fighting it. You can't even change a weakness by talking about it. You can't even change a weakness by becoming sarcastic or by nagging. None of those things can change a weakness. As a matter of fact, once you fight it, once you become sarcastic, once you start to nag about it, all you're going to do is they're going to reinforce the weakness. You're going to inject energy You're going to move that weakness to a whole new scale. All that will do is to frustrate you, kill you, and paralyze your sense of wholeness. You don't want to do that. And so the next thing we're going to talk about is how do we identify what a weakness is and how do we relate with that. I look forward to coming back again to share those thoughts with you. Thank you so much and do have a wonderful time.